This happened to me back 3 years ago. That was a full-fledged backpacking adventure into the deepest, most untouched sections of the mountains far beyond where casual hikers dared to go. I wanted the real deal. No marked trails, no campsites, just me, my pack, and the raw wilderness. I studied maps, packed light, but smart knife, rope, compass, extra layers, enough food for 4 days, and a small tent. I wasn't some amateur. I knew what I was doing. The first 2 days were beautiful, but damn, they were everything I wanted. I covered nearly 15 miles on the first day alone, pushing through thick, untamed brush, crossing streams with water so cold it bit through my boots. The second night, I camped near a small clearing, high on a ridge where I could see the endless stretch of trees below me. I built a fire, cooked freeze-dried meal, and watched the stars until exhaustion dragged me into sleep. I should have enjoyed it more. Should have soaked in the peace. Because after that night, everything turned. On the third morning, I wanted to find water. My map showed a lake about 7 miles east, deep in the valley. It was supposed to be secluded, untouched. So I packed up early, made my way down through dense forest, hacking through overgrown trails that hadn't seen a human footprint in years. It took hours, but I finally got there by early afternoon. The lake was unreal silent, still almost too perfect. I dropped my pack, stretched out my sore legs, and took a deep breath of that crisp, pine-scented air. I had the whole place to myself, or so I thought. It started with a feeling. You know that prickle on the back of your neck? That gnawing sense that you're being watched? Just then, I saw him. Across the lake, hidden by the trees, stood a man. Tall, wiry, dressed in dirty clothes. He wasn't hiking gear kind of dirty. No, this was different. Like he'd been out here too long. His hair was wild, his face shadowed. Just stood there, watching. A normal person, a hiker, would wave, maybe call out. Hell, even a weirdo would at least act like they had a reason for standing there. But this guy? Nothing. Just damn stood there, staring. A cold dread settled in my stomach. I bent down, pretending to mess with my pack, just to break eye contact. When I glanced up again, he was gone. I'm not an idiot. I wasn't about to stick around and wait for some backwoods creep to introduce himself. So, I strapped my pack on and started walking fast. I didn't want to run. Running meant panic. Running meant I'd make noise, that I'd lose track of where I was going. I just needed to put distance between me and that lake. Then I heard it. The sound of footsteps. Fast, crunching through the leaves, gaining on me. I needed to get out of this valley. I needed to reach a road, a town, anything. My map showed an old dirt road about 5 miles northeast. If I could just make it there, I'd be fine. Oh my God. I ran. I didn't think. Didn't plan. My pack bouncing on my back, branches slashing at my arms. I could hear him behind me, heavy, angry footsteps crashing through the woods like he didn't give a damn about stealth anymore. I stole a glance back, and there he was. Closer now. I could see his face, his mouth slightly open, breathing too hard, too fast. He wasn't just following me. He was hunting me. I sprinted harder than I ever had in my life. My legs screamed, but I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. If I fell, if I slowed, I was dead. I don't know how long I ran. Then, it was like a miracle. I saw the road. I burst out of the trees, but I didn't stop. I ran down that road, but somehow I remembered there was a town a few miles ahead. If I just kept running, if I just made it a little further. Lights. A nearby motel, run down and shitty, but it was a lifeline. I went to the motel and quickly got a room without saying much to the person at the counter. I didn't explain anything or even check the room. I just locked the door, shoved a chair under the handle, and collapsed onto the bed, shaking. This experience in a deep woods place was a bad one for me. It was a negative experience that took away my confidence in solo backpacking. Now, I no longer go camping or hiking alone. I only go with friends or in groups. I should have never left the campsite alone that night. Looking back, I can't believe how stupid I was to think a simple phone call was worth wandering off into the pitch-black woods. We had set up camp deep in the North Carolina wilderness, far from any town or major roads. The nearest bit of civilization was over 10 miles away, and even that was just a gas station with an old, rusting pump. My uncle, Liam, had picked this spot for our weekend trip, swearing up and down that it was the most peaceful place on earth. No crowds, no traffic, just nature at its finest. He wasn't wrong. The forest was dense, the air crisp with pine, and the sky stretched out endless above us. That first day, we hiked nearly 10 miles along an old logging trail, weaving through towering pines and thick underbrush. The trail wasn't marked on any official maps, but my uncle had a printed copy from some hiking forum he followed. By dusk, we reached a small clearing next to a glassy lake, perfectly still under the moonlight. The rain had hit hard earlier that evening, drenching the ground and turning the dirt paths to mush. By the time we finished setting up camp, my boots were caked in mud, and my hoodie stuck to my back from the lingering humidity. The storm had passed. We were exhausted, so after some canned chili and a few ghost stories, we called it a night. But around midnight, my phone buzzed in my pocket. One missed call. I hesitated. No service, meant no contact, but for some reason, I had one tiny bar of signal. Maybe if I moved a bit further away from the campsite, I'd get a clearer connection. Stupid. I grabbed my flashlight and slipped out of my tent. My uncle was snoring, dead to the world. The fire had burned low. I stepped away, heading down a narrow footpath toward an empty campsite we had passed earlier that day. It wasn't far, maybe a quarter mile at most. Just enough distance to talk without waking anyone up. I found an old wooden picnic table and sat down, phone pressed to my ear. The line crackled, barely holding the signal, but I could hear the voice on the other end. I was so focused on the conversation that I didn't notice at first. The footsteps. Soft, deliberate, crunching through the damp leaves. I turned, expecting to see my uncle, or maybe another late-night camper. But there was no flashlight, no sound of a tent unzipping or fire crackling from another site. Just darkness, and the figure standing at the edge of the trees. He stood perfectly still, like he was waiting for something. "Hello?" My voice felt small in the vast silence. No answer. A chill ran down my spine. Then, he took a step forward. I didn't wait for another. I bolted, my phone slipping from my hand as I sprinted back toward our camp. My flashlight bobbed wildly, barely illuminating the muddy trail. I could hear him behind me, his footsteps faster now, more urgent. The campsite wasn't far, just a few hundred yards. But with my heart hammering in my chest, it felt like miles. My breath came in ragged gasps, my boots slipping in the wet dirt. And then I tripped. I hit the ground hard, the wind knocked out of me. My flashlight rolled into the underbrush, its beam now uselessly pointed at a tree. I scrambled, trying to push myself up, but I felt a presence looming over me. A rough hand grabbed my hoodie. Panic surged through me. I thrashed, kicking wildly, my heel connecting with something solid. A grunt. The grip loosened just enough for me to twist free. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could hear him cursing under his breath, recovering from the hit. I ran like hell. The moment I burst into the campsite, I screamed for my uncle. My voice must have carried through the trees because within seconds, he was out of his tent, flashlight in hand. I spun around, expecting to see the man behind me. But he was gone. The woods were silent. Too silent. like nothing had ever been there. My uncle didn't question me. He could see the terror on my face. We didn't bother packing up. We left everything behind and started hiking back to the ranger station, which was about 5 miles east. The trek was brutal in the darkness, but we had no choice. We reached the station. Dawn was breaking. The rangers took us in, listened to my story, and sent out a search team. They never found him, but they did find something else. Near the picnic table where I'd been sitting, they discovered a bag. Inside, rope, duct tape, a knife. Whoever that man was, he wasn't just out for a midnight stroll. We never went back for our gear. We never went back at all. My father had been taking us camping for years. Every month, we packed up our gear and headed to the deep woods of Virginia, following trails he knew like the back of his hand. He had a favorite spot, a secluded clearing about 4 miles off the main road, past dense clusters of towering pines and winding, almost usually far enough that we wouldn't hear a single car engine. This was tradition, and for as long as I could remember, it had always been peaceful. The day had gone perfectly. We arrived just after noon, setting up our tents under a broad oak, its thick branches offering shade from the sweltering sun. My little sister, Lily, helped me gather firewood while Mom prepared the food. Dad showed her how to build a perfect campfire, small, controlled, but strong. We spent the afternoon hiking, reaching a high ridge about 2 miles from camp where we could see the rolling wilderness stretch for miles. It was nearing 6:30 p.m. and the sky had already begun to dim. Back to our camp. Dinner was the usual: hot dogs roasted over the fire, laughter. Everything was normal. Perfectly normal. And then, around 8 p.m., things turned over. Lily and I had wandered a short distance from the campsite, just far enough that the firelight barely reached us. She wanted to look at the stars, and I wasn't going to say no. Then I saw them, 2 figures just beyond the tree line, barely visible in the shadows. A chill ran through me. Before I could speak, before I could grab Lily's hand and drag her back to camp, one of them lunged. A hand shot out of the darkness, clamping down on Lily's arm, yanking her off her feet. She screamed, short, terrified. I didn't hesitate. My body moved on its own. I charged without hesitation, slamming my fist into the bastard's jaw so hard I felt the bone crack beneath my knuckles. He stumbled back, releasing Lily, and for a split second, I caught a glimpse of his face, scruffy, filthy, wild eyes burning with something unhinged. The 2 of them muttered to each other, then sneered as one of them, "I'll see you guys later." I stood there, breathing hard. Lily scrambled to her feet, clutching my arm, shaking nervously. We ran, full speed, branches whipping at our faces, feet pounding the dirt. It was maybe 100 yards back to camp, but it felt like miles. When we burst into the firelight, gasping, our parents jumped to their feet. "What the hell happened?" Dad's voice was sharp, his face going pale when he saw Lily's tear-streaked face. "Men," I managed between breaths. "Tried to take her." I hit one. He let go, but they ran. Into the woods. I'd never seen my father move so fast. He grabbed the hatchet from the chopping block, his face set like stone, and took off toward the trees. Mom pulled Lily into her arms, murmuring something I couldn't hear. My chest was still heaving, my fists aching from the hit. Dad came back 5 minutes later, his expression unreadable. "They're gone." "We need to leave," Mom said, her voice tight with fear. We tore down camp, stuffing everything into the truck. By 9:30 p.m., we were speeding down the dirt road, heading straight for the nearest ranger station, 10 miles away. Every set of headlights that appeared on the empty road sent a fresh wave of anxiety through me. I kept checking the back seat, making sure Lily was still there, still safe. We reached the ranger station just before 10:15 p.m. The ranger on duty, a grizzled man with tired eyes, listened intently as Dad explained what happened. He asked for every detail, every description we could give. Then he picked up his radio. "We'll send a team to check it out," he assured us. "You folks should stay here tonight." The ranger let us sleep in a small cabin on the property, but I barely closed my eyes. The next morning, just after sunrise, the rangers returned. They'd found disturbed earth where the struggle happened, along with deep boot prints leading away from the site. They tracked them a ways into the forest, but then nothing. The trail vanished, like the men had simply melted into the trees. "We'll keep an eye out," the ranger promised. "But I'd suggest finding a different camping spot next time." We never went back. And those men? They were never found. That happened to us last year. We were ready for the camping trip we had been planning for months before. This trip wasn't just any getaway. It was Jason's 18th birthday. Spirits were high. The music was loud, and we were all excited to finally escape into the Pennsylvania wilderness. And we wanted to celebrate somewhere isolated, somewhere no one could tell us to keep it down. Pine Creek Gorge was perfect miles of untouched forest, no cell service, and no signs of life. I remember it was 8:30 p.m. We neared our destination. The sun had long since disappeared, and the road ahead was nothing but darkness, the trees crowding in on either side like silent watchers. We grabbed our gear, shouldered our backpacks, and started the 2-mile trek into the forest. The air smelled like damp leaves and pine, crisp with the bite of oncoming winter. That's when the rusted old taxi appeared, creeping up the road behind us. The driver rolled down his window, a gaunt man with hollowed cheeks and sunken eyes. His voice was rough like gravel when he spoke. "You kids sure you wanna be out here?" Jason, ever the confident one, grinned. "Yeah, man. Just a birthday camping trip." The driver's gaze lingered too long, something unreadable in his stare. Then he nodded slowly. "Stay safe." With that, he rolled up his window and drove off, leaving us standing in uneasy silence. "That was weird," Emily muttered. "Just some old creep trying to scare us," Matt laughed, though I could hear the unease in his voice. We shook it off and pressed on. By 9:45 p.m., we found the perfect spot, a secluded clearing encircled by towering oaks, a slow-moving creek whispering nearby. We set up camp, pitched our tents, and built a fire. The flames crackled warmly, pushing back the cold. Music played, drinks were passed around, and soon laughter and conversation drowned out the distant rustling of the woods. By 11:30 p.m., the party was in full swing. We roasted marshmallows. The night stretched on, the firewood dwindled, and exhaustion set in. One by one, everyone stumbled into their tents. Then around midnight, I woke up to a scream. It was sharp, raw, and it ripped. My heart slammed into my ribs as I scrambled out of my tent. The fire was almost out. The others were stirring, groggy and disoriented. "Did you hear that?" Emily whispered. Another scream, distant, but unmistakable. "Could be a fox," Matt said, but he didn't sound convinced. I grabbed my flashlight and swept it across the tree line. "Hey, look over there," I shouted. 30 feet away, standing at the edge of the trail, was a man. He was partially hidden in the shadows, body rigid, face smeared with something dark. In one hand, he clutched a knife. In the other, a lifeless rabbit dangled, its fur matted with blood. "Hello?" "Ryan, the idiot," shouted nervously. The man tilted his head, silent. Ryan took a step forward. "Seriously, man. If this is some local trying to scare us, it's not working." The man moved, not a step, but a sudden, violent lurch forward. Then he ran straight at us. "Run!" I screamed. Panic exploded. We grabbed whatever we could and bolted into the woods, branches slashing our faces. His footsteps pounded behind us, too fast, too close. The darkness swallowed everything, making it impossible to see. We ran blindly, dodging trees, leaping over roots. I didn't know how long we ran, minutes? Hours. But then, through the trees, I saw it. A road. Headlights. A minibus rumbling toward us. Stop! Help us! Emily shrieked, waving her arms. The bus skidded to a halt, and we scrambled inside. The driver, an older man with graying hair, barely had time to ask what was happening before Jason slammed the door shut. I turned back. The man stood in the middle of the road, breathing hard, but he wasn't alone anymore. More figures stepped out of the woods. Silent, watching. The last thing I saw was their silhouettes fading into the trees. We were miles away from our camp. It was that bus that saved our lives, the only reason we managed to escape. We had no idea what was about to happen to us. He wasn't alone. There were more of them lurking in the dark. Even now, I still remember the taxi driver's warning, the way he tried to caution us. But we were too young, too caught up in our excitement to take it seriously. That night became a nightmare, a memory that still lingers like a shadow. If there's one piece of advice I can give you, never go camping or hiking without full preparation. And never underestimate isolation. Out there, anything can happen. You never know